Hi everybody, welcome to trial day 11.
Okay, so today we had a lot of people on the stand. Let's get right to it because we have a lot to cover. So they started the day with the finishing up of testimony with Caitlin Albert. She was questioned about her boyfriend being with her at the waterfall that night. And she had stated that he left early home, leaving her with her parents to go to their house. He left early home because he apparently does part-time work with their landlord or something, plowing road. And so he left after being there for a while at the bar. He left back home to get some rest before he was going to have to head out early in the morning to start plowing the roads. Both herself and Tristan knew that this blizzard was coming, and that's why Tristan was headed home to get some rest before he was going to have to go to work doing this. And so it was their plan to stay the rest of the night at the waterfall bar with her parents and then go back to their house. And apparently Tristan was supposed to go and pick her up after he was done plowing with all the work in the morning. However, it was at 1:45 a.m. according to Caitlin that Tristan returned to Canton from Easton because they live in Easton together. Tristan returned to Canton to pick up Caitlin from her parents' house. They're on Fairview. The road is Fairview in which their house is. This is where the whole incident took place, was on Fairview Road. So in good driving conditions, it takes about 20 minutes to get from Easton to Canton. So that was pretty much what we got out of her testimony. So let's move on to Tristan Morris, who is Caitlin's boyfriend. And his testimony was pretty uneventful because he apparently developed amnesia and couldn't remember anything. So pretty much any question that was asked of him, he couldn't remember. Outside of him being at the waterfall, he completely forgot any information that took place. However, he did say yes, he was at the waterfall when he was asked. He also didn't know if Caitlin was there with her parents. They asked who he was there with. He said he doesn't know, but which we know is a lie because he left her to go home with them to their house. It was really frustrating to watch his testimony, and I think everyone knew he was lying. And at one point, defense did ask if he was told to say you don't remember anything or something of the sort, and he says, no, I just don't remember anything. But he does remember driving very carefully in the snow, hands at 10 and 2 is what he describes. He even forgot what time he went to pick Caitlin up from her parents that morning when she texted him. He said he barely got any sleep. He did remember that he barely got any sleep when he went home. And he doesn't remember when Caitlin called or texted him that night to go pick her up at her parents'. He doesn't recall how much snow was coming down when he went to pick her up. He doesn't know where he parked at the Albert home when he picked Caitlin up. When being cross-examined, Mr. Iannetti, which is one of the defense attorneys, asked him questions about what time he picked her up. And he continued the I don't know, I don't remember defense there, or, answers to the questions. He also had no clue of when he left the bar that night to go home and get rest. He also doesn't remember how long it took for Caitlin to come out of her parents' house when he went to pick her up. So the first time he was interviewed by anyone was a week prior to the testimony in this trial. And it was a phone interview from prosecution, Mr. Lowry. He did say that he didn't drink much that night, so he remembers that part. The plan was not to drive home, and so the plan never was to go home to Easton and sleep just a little and then drive back to Canton to pick up Caitlin from her parents that night. Apparently plans changed, and he then had to go back to Canton to pick her up. But originally, she was going to be picked up after all the plowing was done that morning, which contradicts Caitlin's testimony because she was saying when she was on the stand that she never had plans to stay that night at her parents'. And she left because she didn't want to get snowed in. So he had partial memory awakenings during his testimony. He was questioned and asked if he saw a baseball cap in the lawn or the front yard of the Albert's house, and he said no. He was asked if he saw any, like 45 pieces of plastic on the ground. He said no, or if he'd seen one, and he said no. He was asked if he saw a 200 plus sized man laying on the ground, and he said no. He also was asked, did he see anything out of the ordinary or unusual in the yard, and he said no. And so when he was asked why he went back to Canton to pick her up, Caitlin, he said because she's high maintenance, and so he just does what she says. But he also was asked a specific question, and right before prosecution objected, the question was, why did you go back? It was like, why did you go back to pick her up that night? And he stated because she didn't want to get snowed in. And that was the exact same sentence that Caitlin used when she was on the stand. It just seems more of like everybody's testimony is kind of like really matching up, and you might say, well, that's because that's what really happened. But I've noticed through the testimony, some lines that people are using seem very rehearsed. Now, if you don't like my summary of this trial, I would highly recommend you take the time out of your life and your day and go ahead and watch the hours of testimony for each day. All allegedly, because this is my summary of what I observed and wrote down from what was being said on the trial. Now, it also was made very clear by Tristan himself and Caitlin Albert herself that they knew this blizzard was coming. So for this, I didn't want to be snowed in, or she said she didn't want to be snowed in, was like, oh, we're taken back by the snow, was kind of silly, because we already know that Tristan left back home and left her at the bar because he knew the snow was coming and he wanted to get rest before he had to go out and start plowing and shoveling snow. So there was also a point in the trial where he was, during questioning from defense, he was continuing to give his response. I don't remember. I'm not going to make up a time because I don't remember. And I think defense hung him on some of his words. So let's take a look at that footage.
You were at 34 Fairview Road in Canton at 1:45 in the morning, or about 1:45 on January 29th of 2022, correct?
I don't remember the time.
Was it wildly different than 1:45 in the morning, or was it somewhat close to that?
I'm not going to make up a time. I don't remember.
Was it 9 p.m. on the 28th?
I don't remember times.
So if I asked you if you were there to pick up your girlfriend Caitlin at 9 p.m. on January 28th, you couldn't say if that's true or false?
No, because I'm not making up a time.
Okay, so it could have been 9 p.m. that you were there, not 1:45 in the morning.
I didn't say that.
Well, you've just said that you can't rule out that it was actually 9 p.m. on the 28th, didn't you?
Objection, Your Honor.
Tristan, they put Sarah Livingston on the stand. She is one of the girls that was at the Albert's house that night with Brian Albert Jr., the one that was celebrating his birthday. This was one of the friends of his that was at the house that night. She was asked several questions, and she said she never saw anything in the front yard when she did leave the Alberts home that night. And of course, defense asked the same questions to her. Did you see 45 pieces of plastic in the front yard? She said no. Did you see one piece of plastic in the front yard? She said no. Did you see a baseball cap on the front yard? No. Did you see a shoe in the front yard? No. Did you see a 200 plus size man laying on the ground? She said no. Did you see anything unusual, or did you see anything out of the ordinary in the front yard? No. All answers of no. One other thing she was asked is if she had refused to talk to defense when they wanted to question her, and she said it's not that she refused to talk to them, it's just that she lives with her parents, and apparently they reached out to her at her parents' house while she was at work, and that she took the courtesy of her own time to contact defense to tell them she's not going to talk to them, and she knows her rights and she doesn't have to talk to them, and she has nothing to say to them. Being that the case, I mean, you could have information about somebody who died, who they're trying to find out who killed the person, and you not wanting to talk to them, I think is a little shady. I don't know. That's just my opinion. I'm not in the situation, but given the fact that they're trying to put someone away for murder and the fact that this person may have done it or may not have done it, I think, would you really be okay with knowing you have this piece of information and someone may be going to prison for the rest of their life for something they didn't do just because you didn't want to speak up about it, or vice versa? You could be putting away the person that did do it, and since you're not saying anything, they're going to get away with it. It could go both ways. But we didn't get much out of Sarah Livingston, and so they also moved on to Julie Nagel, which was another one of the females at the house, at the Albert house that night, to hang out with Brian Jr. for his birthday, which would have been the following day, but they're hanging out that night. So Julie Nagel, she had called her brother, or messaged her brother to pick her up from the Albert home. When her brother got there that night, she went out to talk to her brother, and I think he was with a friend, and she told them to come inside, and they didn't want to because they wanted to go home. She decided she was just going to stay longer at the house and get a ride from Jennifer and Matthew McKay's. They were going to give her a ride home, and so she just took a ride with them instead of with her brother. However, what was different about this testimony, when Mr. Lowry, the prosecution, he clearly caught on to what defense was continued to ask each witness that came on. So, this being his witness and putting her on the stand, he took the opportunity to ask the questions to her himself. And I'll tell you something very strange that came out of that different tactic when Mr. Lowry decided he was going to ask the questions, and the different answers we got from this particular witness, Julie. So Julie described how she left the house that night with Sarah, the one that was on the stand before, and Matthew and Jennifer McKay. Jennifer McKay is Nicole Albert's sister. Nicole Albert and Brian Albert are the ones that live in this house. So when Mr. Lowry was asking her questions, she said when she described it when she left home with Sarah, Matthew, and Jennifer, she was asked if she saw something or anything in the yard that at the time she left. And she said, I did notice something out of the ordinary, like a black blob on the ground by the flagpole. Now that's very specific, and you got to remember that this is the first time prosecution took the questions the defense has been asking each witness, and he asked those questions himself. And we got a very specific description of something out of the ordinary, like a black blob on the ground by the flagpole. Really, that's what you saw? Now, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure, based off of those specific words she used, she was coached in what to say. Now, that may be me. You may disagree with that, and that's totally fine, and I'm glad you do. However, that's what it sure looks like. So after she said she saw this black blob on the ground by the flagpole when they were driving by on her way home, she also then followed it up with, she was very intoxicated, so she's not really sure what she saw. And so she had been at the Alberts home since 6:00 p.m. that evening and left around 1:45 a.m. and to which she was drinking the entire time. However, she started to then draw a blank, just like Mr. Tristan did, where she stopped remembering everything that was asked to her. And that amnesia only came when defense started asking her questions. So what we learned through defense questions is that when she left the Alberts home that night, getting a ride from Jennifer and Matthew McKay, as well as Sarah being in the vehicle and getting a ride home as well. Matthew was driving the SUV, which was like a Tahoe or something. Jennifer was in the passenger seat, and in the back seat behind the driver was Julie, and then behind the passenger side was, in the back seat was Sarah. So Sarah was closest to the lawn when the car was driving by. So that would put Julie over here behind the driver's seat at night at like 1:45 in the morning when it was snowing and looking across the road into the lawn. She said when they were driving by, she said, I think I see a black blob there. And that people in the vehicle just said, what? And she's like, I don't know. And that no one addressed anything. Sarah is also a nurse, the one that's in the passenger seat in the back with her. So the friend Sarah is a nurse. You know, Brian Albert, the owner of the home, he is a first responder, an officer. So you had several people here who would have been able to attend to somebody if she saw them laying in the ground. Defense asked her if she at any point made anyone aware, like, I think I just saw a body on the ground. She said no. You know, they asked her, like, so is this normal for you to see a body on the ground and just not bother to help the person? There was a lot of objections that took place. She was also asked, like, hey, did you message Brian Albert Jr. that there was something black, like a black blob in his front yard, that it could be a body or something? And she said, no, I didn't. And there was more objections. But again, you got to factor in she's been drinking since 6 o'clock p.m. And then part of the amnesia she got to is defense was asking her where did the alcohol come from? And she said she didn't know. And they asked, did you take the alcohol to the house? And she said, I don't know. And so he asked, was the alcohol already at the house? And she said, I don't know. And you can tell they're being evasive and just pretending to not remember anything. So it was pretty frustrating. And I think it was pretty clear to everybody there that they're clearly lying. So defense was also trying to see how well she knew Matthew and Jennifer McKay, and she kind of acted like she didn't know them well at all. She was asked if she had ever been to the McKay family's home, and she said she didn't think so. Mr. Yannetti, the defense attorney, he stated to her, haven't you driven their girls around? And she said, yes, I have. And he said, and didn't you dog sit for their dog, some like golden doodle or some little dog, at their house? And she said, yes. And so Mr. Yannetti said, so you have been to their house, haven't you? And she said, yes. So within her own like 5 sentences, she ended up contradicting. She went from, no, I don't think I've ever been to their house, to, yes, I've driven their girls around. Yes, I've dog sat for them at their house. Like, so, you know, based off of that testimony, you then have to question all of the rest of the answers she's given. If you were part of the jury, it's up to you then to gauge how much of the testimony you want to believe and trust of that person after seeing that they're lying and contradicting themselves within their own testimony. When defense was asking her more questions about, like, what time did you message your brother to pick you up? She says she doesn't remember. He asked, what time did your brother show up to pick you up? And she says she doesn't know. She doesn't remember. But one of the things she did remember was she remembers specifically that when Mr. Brian Albert got home, he went upstairs, got the dog, Chloe, out of the room, carried her by her collar all the way to the door, and let her outside to use the bathroom, waited by the door, got her, and took her back up to the bedroom. Which is another, like, really, this is what you remember? You have amnesia about everything else, but you remember that specific thing, because part of the questioning the defense has been asking is about this dog Chloe and how aggressive she is and how she doesn't get along with other people. And apparently this dog was also a former police dog. It's just little statements like that. It's just like, okay, like, you were clearly told to say that, because that part you remember, but you don't remember anything else. You don't remember how much you drank. You don't remember where the alcohol came from. You don't remember if you took it there. Like, you don't you don't remember when your brother went to pick you up. You don't know when you messaged your brother to pick you up. And another interesting thing with part of her memories is she remembers looking out the window 3 times that night. And during those 3 times, she saw a black SUV out by the mailbox. And then it moved forward, and then it stopped, and then it moved forward again, and then stopped. So she saw it, like, move 2 times and saw it, like, in 3 different locations. And when defense was questioning her about that, he had asked, like, okay, so you saw this vehicle out there? Was it moving fast? And she said, no. Was it moving like 50 miles per hour? And she said, well, I didn't have a radar gun, but no, it was. So he said, was it safely moving forward or slowly moving forward? And she said, yes. And he said, did you ever see it reverse? And she said, no, I didn't. which is very key because remember, part of what's been proposed is that Karen Reed backed up and hit John O'Keefe with her vehicle and hit him and therefore broke the brake light of the vehicle. So back to how she couldn't remember when her brother picked her up. She couldn't remember, or went to pick her up. She couldn't remember when she messaged him. She couldn't remember any of the times. However, it was revealed through cross-examination from defense that Jennifer McCabe, which is the one she got the ride home from, she actually asked Julie for a screenshot of her and her brother's conversation from that night, and she gave Jennifer McCabe that screenshot of that conversation.
Now, on January 29th of 2022, after midnight, your brother Ryan Nagel and you lived in the same home, correct?
At the time, yes.
At about 12:15 to 12:20, you texted your brother Ryan for a ride home, correct?
If that's what the timestamp says, yes.
Do you have a screenshot of that text message?
Somewhere, yes.
Did you provide that to any investigator or assistant district attorney?
I don't remember.
Do you recall whether any assistant district attorney or investigator asked you for a copy of that text message?
I don't know.
Is that text message still on your phone?
I don't know.
Did you delete that text message?
I don't
Objection,
know.
Your Honor.
So let's move this along, Mr. Hayden.
I want to play some footage real quick from some questioning that was by defense that revealed, I believe, which was another instance where defense was able to hang them from their own testimony. So let's take a look at that.
When you texted Ryan that night, you were contacting him because you thought it was an appropriate time for you to leave, correct?
Yeah.
How long did it take your brother Ryan to get to the Albert home after that text message?
I don't know.
Was it an hour?
I don't think so, no.
Was it a half hour?
I do not know.
So you have no idea how long it took him to get there and how long you stayed after you texted him, correct?
I don't know, no.
You didn't ask Matthew McCabe to stop.
No.
You didn't ask him to back up.
Nope.
You didn't ask him to check on whatever it was.
Objection, Your Honor.
No.
You had your phone with you, correct?
Yeah.
Your phone was working, correct?
I don't remember.
You used that phone to text your brother.
Hour and a half before. Hour and a half before.
Are you testifying today that your phone was completely out of charge?
I don't remember, no.
So that was the end of trial day 11. Stay tuned for trial day 12.